Today, we're talking with Billy Cripe, founder of BloomThink, about how to bring companies from under 10 million to 100 million plus. Welcome to BeyondSaaS. I'm Jason Neidel, founder of Tethos. We're a growth agency, and for over 20 years, we've been accelerating tech company growth through strategy, branding, lead gen, and conversion. Go ahead and check out tethos.com/podcast for a free report summarizing what nearly 20 amazing tech leaders have shared on how to grow your own tech company. I'm really excited to explore tech company growth with Billy Cripe. He is founder of BloomThink, and he serves often as a fractional CMO, where he offers in-demand teams of experts to deliver hypergrowth. And fun fact, I hear that you were a hype generator for 10 years as a master of ceremonies. So that sounds like you have a fun life here. Welcome, Billy.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here, Jason. I appreciate it.
So I'd love to offer listeners a quick tip. Do you have a golden nugget or something fun to offer here?
Sure. So the latest technology that I'm absolutely gushing about right now is a small feature inside of Notebook LM, which is an LLM system from Google that it's a little bit different from, say, Perplexity or ChatGPT or some of the other LLMs in that you get to upload your content corpus and then interact with the LLM on that corpus of content. Now, it's been trained against all the other, big data sets. But it's very intelligent. Now, the little golden nugget that I have for you is inside Notebook LM, there is a little button that says create audio overview. And I swear to God, you hit that, a couple seconds later, you have a full 14 to 22 minute podcast with two human voices, a male, a female. They're interacting, talking about the stuff that you just uploaded. And it blows my mind. You don't get kind of goofy robot voice. You have pauses and ums and ahs. It's very natural sounding. It might put us out of business, but it is absolutely wonderful for things like, hey, I want to review everything here, but I don't have time to sit and read it. I want to listen to it either during my workout or on my commute. And it's ready to go, just in seconds. It's absolutely phenomenal.
That is super cool. I haven't been doing golden nuggets. I ran out around episode 10 or something, but that just made me think of something that's been blowing my mind lately, and it is a little bit related. Have you tried the deep research feature on ChatGPT?
Yes, I have.
So cool.
It's very cool. I love the chapter and verse citations that it gives. I love that it's hyperlinked. It's really good. And what amazes me is how fast the LLMs have come from the earlier days, which was really only a year or two ago, where the hallucinations were rampant throughout the content that they would generate. They sounded good, and it was like, I want to go check up on that. And the sources or the quotes or the things that they were referencing literally didn't exist. Well, now it's like, no, here's where it is, and you can find the information where it is. So there's a lot more confidence in what the LLMs are citing and how they are weaving it together. It's a lot more of a reasoned approach, which I really appreciate.
When I'm doing my discoveries, I've taken several clients lately and I've said, examine the industry and examine who's doing what well and who's not doing what well, and now look at my client and now find opportunities for growth there. And it gives this giant report with 60, 70 sources, and it's like a really good foundational starting point. And of course, you have to do real work after that and figure it out. But there's so much data that would have taken me hours and hours and hours to find, and it's all right there.
Exactly. Now take those sources, load them up into Notebook LM, and interrogate those sources directly with Notebook LM, or have it put together a little overview podcast for you.
Exactly, right? How cool would that be?
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. I just did this for a client where we had to go through literally thousands of pages of government regulation documentation and talk about something that no human being wants to sit and read and try and parse this, upload it, have it generate a summary, and now you can start interrogating it with your keyboard. And then I ended up, having it output a little, 20-minute summary overview. It's not going to give you a dissertation in that overview, but it is going to give you the gist. And that's going to be enough, at least for somebody like me who's helping lots of companies across various different industries grow or scale up. It's really becoming an invaluable tool.
I love that. All right, well, tell me a little bit about BloomThink and your fun fractional CMO roles.
Yeah, you know what? BloomThink started in 2011. And it came out of my career with big tech, some out there in Northern California, a little bit north of where you are at. And I had done computer programming and then product management and then product marketing. That was kind of the evolution there. And I started up my own thing because in my opportunities working with big tech around the world, I was interacting with different industries. We were taking a core basis of middleware technology and implementing it in all different places for solving all kinds of different problems. And that was really attractive to me. And that then really dovetails into people with an idea, startups and younger companies who are like, hey, we want to do a thing, but we're not really sure how to orient it or target it or support our organization, our sales organization, our channels, our partners, whatever. So I started up BloomThink and got really deep in with some angel investors and some early stage companies who are all looking for a little bit of help, but they're not yet ready to kind of jump in with both feet to build up a whole marketing department or hire a CMO, but they know they need some. Mm-hmm. And that was a great niche. For me, it keeps my ADD happy, and I get to keep on learning all about new things and new technologies and new approaches. I'm dangerous enough with technology and code to be able to understand what's going on, although I wouldn't trust me to write a lick of production code anymore. And it really helps to focus in on that startup and scale up growth mindset. I really found a passion for hyper growth, hyper focused demand gen, and really building that momentum around growth and problem solving. And what I found through doing BloomThink and which I'm still doing to this day is I get engaged with a company or several, and eventually one of them says, let's stop dating, let's get married. And we come on board, I come on board for a certain amount of time, help them grow up and scale up. What I don't do well at is sitting behind a keyboard or a spreadsheet and just working on budgets and cranking out marketing budgets and marketing reports all day long. I like to get my hands dirty. I like to go out and talk to people and to listen, most importantly, to companies, to salespeople, to product managers, to users, end users. And that allows me to kind of absorb all of this information, synthesize it, repackage it, and then reflect it back to the market, which is really a critical mechanism for driving hyper growth or scale up opportunities in these companies. For a little while, I was Chief Marketing Officer at Field Nation, a human capital management platform that created a marketplace. In the early days, pre-pandemic, this was 2012 to 2016 or so, when the contingent workforce was just starting to become a thing. We didn't even talk about fractional CMOs. It was like contingent workers and, Fiverr and Upwork and some of these other big platforms were just starting to ramp up. And Field Nation found a niche. They're still around today doing great in field service workers. So skilled licensed workers who are out building data centers, pulling cable and running, they've got to have, they're building the cell towers and doing the real, high wire acts literally out there. And the big companies that need these services, they don't have the internal staff to deploy 1,000 people around the United States or around Europe. So they find contingent workers on a platform. Did that for a little while, took them from about 10 million to about 120 million. Then a PE firm that I'm connected with said, hey, we need your help over in cybersecurity. What do you know about cybersecurity? I said, nothing, but I know marketing and I know how to integrate companies. So we took a division out of this big company and smashed it up with a smaller cybersecurity startup out of Utah, and then pulled in an Israeli company with some really cool technology and mashed that up, all while we were also going from an on-prem solution with servers and blades and racks in a data center to a full SaaS cloud solution. So that was absolutely mind-blowing. Started that as a fractional CMO, and then we said, let's stop dating, let's get married for a little while there. Came back to Minnesota and started working for another ransomware reversal company out of Silicon Valley. Again, super cool technology. I got to learn all about symmetric key intercept and how decryption works in the deepest guts of the BIOS and stuff. More than I could, I can't even give it due credit in explaining it here, but some really, really neat tech. And then in 2020, another guy who I used to work with back in the early 2000s became CEO of a greenhouse gas accounting company, CIBO Technologies. And he said, hey, we need help with marketing. I've just taking over this company. We're doing some restructuring. Can you come in and help? I came in on contract. Again, we said, let's stop dating, let's get married. I've been with them for 5 years. And then at the beginning of this year, this calendar year, I just went back on contract with them, and I'm wrapping up my contract there with CIBO Technologies. But they're really doing some incredible work with AI and machine learning, not the LLM stuff that we've been talking about, but real deep convolutional neural network, computer vision, and ecosystem modeling. So deep in the weeds here of what's going on in and under the ground and on top of the ground.
Can you say weeds when you're working with agricultural
It's deep
companies?
in the weeds. There's so many dirt and farming and plant puns. It's disgusting. I love it.
So your title is Fractional CMO, and you talked about listening and repackaging. What is at the heart of that title, or VP of Marketing? What's at the heart of that makes what you do special?
For me, I found that it's really about listening to what's going on out in the market, synthesizing that, repackaging, and reflecting it back to the market. Nobody gets paid in leads. And this is one of the things that I learned early on by a CFO who I have immense respect for, kind of took me under his wing after I was, waving a report around in the air. Look how many leads we have, and the MQLs and the SQLs and the funnel and blah, blah, blah. And he said, Billy, stop. Nobody gets paid in leads. He said that to me 15 years ago, and to that day, that still resonates with me. And I'm like, that is the lens that we need to look at the world through. Nobody gets paid in leads. The way that we get those dollars is by solving problems, making people's lives easier, solving a critical problem that they have for their business. And that's a really exciting opportunity for us as marketers and as growth professionals to really get into, because we're not trying to extract as our primary focus, extract dollars, extract value. We're trying to provide and give. And that is that kind of rising tide that lifts all boats. The value comes, and it keeps coming back when we keep our word, we keep an authentic voice, and we actually do what we say we're going to do without all the hype and hyperbole. And when you have that authentic growth and that real those real results that you can point to, that gets people excited, and that creates incredible value, and that it creates incredible stories, that it creates a gravity that is attractive to the rest of the market that you're targeting, to new markets, to people from a hiring and cultivation standpoint, for organizations that want to grow that way. It really is kind of the secret sauce is, as far as I've found. And I'm still learning, right? So there might be something more else out there, but for right now, it's doing really pretty good.
And it only happens with listening and hearing what their needs are, understanding those, and then making sure that you're actually delivering the value back in that. I just had a tech CEO on last week who said he was obsessed and worked, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the first thing he did is he went and interviewed 300 of his potential prospects and clients one by one to figure out what they really wanted. And I'm like, yeah, that's obsessive, but at the same time, you knew more than Gartner knew at that point.
Right.
And is it surprising that your company went from 0 to 7 million in a half a year?
Right. Exactly. If we're out there all shouting, and there's so many tools and techniques for pushing messages out into the world. We may have 80% of it right, but it's still going to be missing the mark, and we're going to be out competed and outperformed and outsold by companies who have taken the time to focus on that core message. And so that's why that it's got to be a continual cycle of listening and recalibrating and hearing where the market is going.
So how do you quote unquote listen?
Yeah.
Initial interviews you mentioned, but what happens after that?
This is where, and I'm fortunate to have worked in both computer programming and product development and product management before I ever got into marketing, but continually refining that. And that is everything from informal focus groups to being out there and voraciously consuming everything that you can. And this is where the LLMs can really help accelerate that information consumption process for us. Listen to the podcasts. Most importantly, talk to your customers. Have the customer advisory boards or the user advisory boards. even if they're informal, right? Use Slack or Teams or use Google Chat to, convene these informal user groups. And of course, there's incentive software out there that actually works pretty well to incentivize this sort of participation with your users, with your prospects. But you have to continually be listening to that. And from a process development process, I'm a big believer in agile, and you have to be agile enough to reprioritize almost at the drop of a hat. And if your development cycles are really long because you've got complex software or manufacturing or whatever, you've got to do your due diligence ahead of time, not only to know what the market wants today, but to know that they're still going to want it at the end of your product release cycle or your manufacturing cycle or whatever. Things are changing that fast. And, the flip side of that is true too. You can be pivoting so much and not necessarily, 180 degree pivots, but you can be switching directions or reprioritizing so much that you never get anything out or never get anything out that's fully baked. And so that's the challenge is to do that balancing act. The other thing that I've seen companies really struggle with is going down deep, listening to one customer, maybe it's their biggest customer, and then you built a really great solution for a market the size of one. And that's a really hard way to scale a business, especially when they're a very important early adopting customer. So that is really a challenge, but you want to look at adjacencies. I'm a big fan of spiraling up and outward from this core. And so that means at every step along that spiral, finding those adjacencies, whether those are adjacent markets, adjacent use cases. And then I'm also a huge fan, especially from the marketing side of the world, on remix and reuse of content, of themes, of whatever. I mean, this podcast that we're recording can be chopped up and reused into a number of LinkedIn posts and social media posts and maybe a video and maybe.
Don't worry, I'll send you clips.
Right, all of the things, like let's reuse that. That's how we can achieve an economy of scale. With this, well, let's do that with our product, with our services offerings, and then there's still really no substitute, in my opinion, for the for the customer testimonial, for the success testimonial, because winners win, and winning is attractive to people who are unsure. It's a confidence builder out in the market. Like, oh, well, they did it. They're like me, and they used this, or they implemented that, or they bought that service, and it really helped them. I can see how that would help me. If nobody knows that story, then it doesn't matter how great your service or value or product or whatever was delivered for that one company. You've got to get that information out in the world.
Makes me think about two things. I just had a client and I interviewed his top 10 current customers and really understood, and he doesn't have that many consulting, and I really understood what he was doing in that regard. And then now that we're talking about it, it's making me think, well, he wants to go to a broader market, and I need to make sure to not apply that one market of people who can spend $2,000 a month to the people who are spending $50 a month. Completely
Right.
different audiences, and I need to understand that other audience separately.
And their drivers are going to be different as well, right? And finding that overlap, that's where you can get those economies of scale, right? You can lean into the areas of overlap. That's great, but then you have to modify and tweak the offering or product so that it meets what the market can bear. Or you have to figure out a way to, convince those $50 a month folks that, this is actually worth, $2,000 a month, and I'm going to go ahead and lean in on that.
Yeah, right. And then the other thing it made me think about is I was looking at a voice instructor, and testimonials is key, but it's also the brand names, right? If she were teaching, I don't know, Christina Aguilera, then she could charge $500 an hour instantly, right? With one name.
Right. Right.
Which is like the logos that you see on the bottom of every, you work with IBM and this and that, right? Then therefore you must be valuable.
From a go-to-market standpoint, those are trust proxies. I've been trusted by this company. Well, that lets me know that at least they did their due diligence and they're willing to let CIBO or to let Billy or to let BloomThink, to let Jason put their logo on his webpage. Okay, I'm willing to give them a listen. I'm willing to give them a try. I don't think anybody's going to sign a contract on that basis or make a purchase agreement. It absolutely does open the door. And having those trust proxies are really important. It's all about boosting confidence. We live in a noisy marketplace. And so anything that you can do to say, hey, you can trust what I'm doing, to at least open the door to have that conversation.
So our audience here are tech CEOs, and a lot of times they're not marketing people as much as they are tech people. Do you do you have kind of an arc of a strategy when you come in to look at the marketing? Do you have a broad structure that you look at that maybe they can think through their marketing with?
That's a really good question. There is an approach. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. And so I've developed, I guess I'll call it a playbook, but I like to think of it more like a marketing pantry, right? Because what we're doing here is we're taking ingredients and we're crafting something. And in some organizations, we're going to craft for speed and throughput, right? It's fast food and it's going to be tasty and delicious. We're going to sell a lot of it. It's going to be cheap. Other organizations, you want full-on white glove, concierge level treatment, Michelin star level substance here. And that's going to be much more of a bespoke process. It's going to take a little bit longer, but the quality is going to be so much higher. And there's no right or wrong. I call it my little marketing pantry, and then I have a whole series of different recipes that can be optimized for speed and throughput or for gourmet deliciousness. But the very first thing that I do, and I tell even prospects, you need to do this, or you can hire me to come in and do this. We need to understand your target addressable market. Who are we talking about here? And so many CEOs are so bright and they've invented a thing or they've coded an app or a program. They've created something that's really cool. And now they're like, well, now what? They don't necessarily have an idea of how to go forward with it. A friend of mine calls this an accidental CEO. Oh, I'm running a company. What am I supposed to do? He comes in and helps advise the company. Sometimes he brings me in to help run and structure marketing so that they can grow and scale. His name is Pete Steggy, and he runs his consultancy, B2B Clarity, for what it's worth. But I love his thought process there around this accidental CEO. Who is it that we're marketing to? And a good example is when I was first at CIBO Technologies, one of the very first things that I did way back then is they were starting an app that was essentially Zillow, but for farmland. And one of the first things that I did was a deep TAM analysis on how much farmland in the United States is being bought and sold, and what's the value of that. And we very quickly discovered, just doing that research, that something like 5% of all farmland that is bought and sold in the United States in any given year is on the open market. All the rest of it is a handshake deal with the neighbor, or it's sold to a family trust, or to the nephew or the son. It's not on the open market. And so having a Zillow for farmland, there's not enough throughput here for us to build a business on something that's geographically constrained to the United States. So we quickly pivoted away from that. Now there's some really cool underlying technology. They're doing amazing things now with greenhouse gas quantification and sustainability programs. But in those early days, right, we knew we needed to get something out. We knew we needed to have some talking points. It wasn't going to go anywhere because there's not enough market there. And so that's a really important approach. And for organizations that have, say, services offerings, if there's productized services offerings where they're serving many different industries, so then you have to understand the TAM for each of those industries that you're serving. Not just we've got smart consultants and they all have PhDs, but also here's how we're going to be able to deploy them and deliver those services. And here's what the dollars available are. And here's what the competition looks like. And here's how we are differentiated. Here's what the buying cycle looks like. If we've got enough runway from fundraising or whatever for 12 months and the buying cycle has an average of 18 months, that's not a good recipe for success, even if you're brilliant. It's just understanding the mechanics of all of those go-to-market motions and figuring something out at the beginning. So starting with the TAM, and then understanding what that runway to revenue is. How long does it take from first touch to first dollar? And that's not a marketing process. That's not a sales process. That's a whole business process. So you have to understand the value of your market and how long is it going to take you to go from first touch to first dollar. And then how are you going to maintain and persist those folks while going after new business? Once you have those three key levers, then I think there's not many more levers that you can pull or that you need to pull. Everything else after that becomes tactics to drive awareness, engagement, and sales opportunity. Those are the three elements that I focus on. But a lot of marketers out there these days are like, oh, you've got to use HubSpot AI, or you've got to use Marketo, or this tool, or that platform, or the Adobe Suite is fantastic. It's like, you know what? All of these platforms, and I've used all of them throughout my career, they're all great. They all do kind of the same standard stuff, and then they all have kind of areas of specialty. That's great. At the end of the day, those aren't winning you business. It's your story, your engagement, and your proof points out there in the market with that authentic voice that are gaining the awareness, earning you those rights to engage with the market, and then yielding those opportunities that you can bring over the finish line.
Cool. So you specialize in hypergrowth. What do you see companies miss over and over again when it comes to actually getting there? Every company says they want hypergrowth. What are they consistently screwing up?
I love a great email campaign. I love digital marketing. I love throwing ads that are so creative and well designed and compelling that they speak really, really well to the people who already love the product or the company. But I see so much money and resource being thrown that way without that understanding of what we're doing, who we're going after. I've recently seen a resurgence in kind of spray and pray email marketing, but we're going to use a little bit of AI to personalize. And clearly it was one of these things where somebody had mined either my LinkedIn profile or the company's website. And so they got some of these keywords right, but did absolutely zero after that to tie what they're talking about. And they hadn't done any sort of research to figure out who we are, what we need, or who we go after. The challenge is that, what's attractive about the spray and pray models or the throwing a bunch of money at digital ads is you can get really big reach really quickly. You can be like, oh, I can deliver, a million impressions to your website in a month. And it's like, yeah, you can, but those eyeballs aren't the eyeballs that you care about. And I still see that happening because there's a lot of money that's changing hands, especially younger companies with CEOs or boards of directors who are not necessarily schooled in marketing, and they need those quick hits. They hear the promises and they're like, oh, all I have to do is write a check or send some money and then they'll get me all these impressions. And then they do that for 3 months, 6 months, a year sometimes, and go, where's the revenue? And then you've got the marketers who are doing the hand wavy thing, like, well, look at all of the impressions that we got you and look at the click-through rates of these. It's like that stuff doesn't matter if it's not translating into dollars or subscriptions or, ARR and MRR.
Gets back to your earlier statement about, leads aren't paying bills.
Yeah. Nobody gets paid in leads, right? We're not getting paid in these impressions. In fact, one of the first things I did when I came on at CIBO is I inherited a very expensive digital marketing contract, and we had to basically buy our way out of that because, again, it was one of these things where we were the previous administration, right? I'll blame that. I inherited a contract, but it was like they agreed to this thing, and the contract was delivering on the promise of the contract, which was we're going to make your web traffic go up, and it was really high. That was one of the things I was impressed with at first, and I was like, oh well, who are these people? Nobody who matters, nobody who would ever buy a thing from us. So it's like, you remember back when Twitter was Twitter before it was X, and Instagram was new and stuff, and you could buy followers and they were all bots and fake profiles and stuff. That had a flash in the pan for a little while. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter what you're selling, other than having the vanity data point of look how many followers I have. It's not doing anything. And those followers aren't real and they're bots, and eventually they get purged. So I still see a lot of that happening out there, and it's hard to scale. It's harder to scale good, thoughtful, deep research on an organization, on a prospect. But I think it's really important. That notion of hyper-personalization, I think, is really important. Once you've identified your addressable market and you've got your customer profile and you know what your buyer persona is, you can really lean into a detailed account-based marketing strategy. Here are the people and here are the buying teams, and here's the conferences that they're speaking at, and the magazines that get delivered to their office, and how am I going to target those people, and maybe one degree of separation from a lookalike with a LinkedIn campaign to get just awareness, and then I'm going to follow up with maybe even a snail mail package that I can know is going to be delivered, right? It's going to be something that is, unique to them, not cheap, not garbage. But you can't do that to, 1 million people a month and keep your investors happy. You can do that to, 10 or 100 people a month and keep your investors happy. And you're creating those moments of engagement after you have the awareness, and then that earns the right typically to have a conversation. But those are things that have to be narrowly tailored, and it takes time, and it takes some deeper investment. You're not going to get as many people for $1 million or $1,000 as you are with a spray and pray method, but that spray and pray method's not going to yield the result that you want. So
one of our podcast guests was telling me that education was their biggest problem in trying to get people to understand. So they were targeting people and trying to get these videos out. And then they had a very narrow list of targets, like it was 20 or 30 people.
Okay.
And so I had seen this thing on Kickstarter where they have these tiny TVs and they're $50 and it's a cute little TV that's this big, and you load it up with a USB and you could load your videos in there, and you push the button on the front and it switches channels, which just basically switches to another one of your videos. And I'm like, hey, what if you just loaded up like 10 of your videos on the TV and just mailed the TV to these guys? Like I 100% guarantee they're going to watch it. You can record some cool intro, right?
Right.
Hey guys, it's blah, 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 right? It's switch the channels and see what you learn.
How much cooler is that than the lame email that you're getting? It's like, oh, I made a video for you. It's like, okay.
They're going to show everybody their TV.
Right, exactly. Right. I've seen something similar. It wasn't a little mini TV. It was basically a postcard, and you flip open the top, and there's a little
super cool
video screen. That's because technology allows us to do that. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And guess what? Yeah, each one of those devices costs a little bit more than an individual email or a video that you record on your phone and be like, hi, I'm Billy. Jason, I've created a value proposition for you. Would you like to see it? That had its moment probably 8-9 years ago when that was new and novel. It's got that novelty factor, and it sure beats sending them a branded pen or something, a squish ball that you get. I don't think that growth is really focused on the next tchotchke that you can send to somebody, but it's finding creative ways to get in front of them without hoodwinking them. Because even if you get the opportunity by like fooling them, like, oh, the subject line fooled you, now they're just upset at you. And now you've lost that credibility. You've lost that authentic voice. And that's something that's really important.
That's huge as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so what if we step out to the harder 30,000-foot question? What are you doing to grow your business, and what are your growth goals?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So my growth goals, I'm looking for 3 new clients over the next 6 months that are focused on, ideally, my ideal customer profile are startup or scale out businesses that are in the sustainability or greenhouse gas or ESG space. Those are all acronyms that basically mean the same thing. We're focused on reducing emissions, on climate goals and sustainability. And they're B2B SaaS tech, right? So that's where I've made kind of my area of focus.
Nothing niche-y about that.
And so B2B SaaS tech, really focused on sustainability and ESG, really, because I've really gone deep into that space really over the last 5 years. And there's all kinds of innovations that are happening there. And so doing direct outreach primarily to VC firms and incubators that are supporting these companies, saying, hey, you've made a bet on 10 of these companies with your sustainability investment thesis. You're hoping that one of them pops. Bring me in. I've got this experience. I know the players. I know the businesses, and I've already come preloaded with the TAM information and the ICPs to be able to go to market here. And I've got a nice big marketing pantry that we can either, modify for speed and violence or for this kind of gourmet experience. The second thing that I'm doing to grow my business is I'm really leaning in on LinkedIn. I've been writing a series of long form articles on the future-focused CMO, and it really seeks to distill all of the new lessons that I've learned, and then a lot of the new how AI is impacting marketing, especially in B2B SaaS tech. And when I say AI, I mean not just the LLMs that we're using, the chat GPTs and perplexities of the world, but also the deep machine learning innovations that are happening kind of under the covers in a lot of these organizations. Being conversant in ML technology is important, especially because a lot of the startup companies are genius level folks who have built these models and these ML systems, and then they're training the data, and they need more data. They're so data hungry, and they then are like, but it can do all of this cool stuff, but they don't really know how to translate that out to the rest of the market. I'm like, well, look, I just went through the
I
school of
see
hard
that over and
knocks.
over again. Yeah.
So let me come in here. I can help. I can help accelerate this. So I'm writing about this on LinkedIn, and you can find that on my LinkedIn profile. It's linkedin.com/in/Billy, because I was an early adopter. I just got just Billy on my LinkedIn
Nice.
profile. Yeah. That makes it convenient. But I've got all these articles out there. And one of the things there, I'm doing this with a colleague who I reached out to on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, I like what you're writing about. Why don't we write a thing together? And so we've been working on this next long form article together. So there's an offer that's buried in there to say, hey, if somebody's interested in this topic, which is something that my co-writer colleague and I can deliver, then DM us. We'll give you this thing for free, and now we've got established an engagement with you, and we can create a connection. So it's some of this guerrilla thought leadership marketing that's focused on that particular space, right? B2B SaaS tech first, and then sustainability second. So that's how I'm going after it. Now, my client, CIBO Technology, is growing in a very different manner than I'm growing BloomThink. And what CIBO Technologies is leaning into is very detailed account-based marketing with a hyper-focused, this hyper-personalization that I've talked about. They've hyper-personalized their outreach on all the different channels, marketing channels. So that means not just email. It also means LinkedIn ads. It also means industry trade pubs. It also means podcast webinars. And then we've got, Q1 in the agriculture space is always the big conference and trade shows times, because nobody's farming in the Northern Hemisphere typically. So they go to trade shows or they go on vacation. I got our CEO main stage speaking at World Agritech in San Francisco, one of the biggest agricultural technology conferences. So it's not, there's no one magic bullet for marketing. It's and the reason we picked these conferences and these events and this sort of this style of LinkedIn digital advertising is because we had already done the research in Q3 and Q4 last year to know where are our targets going to be. They're going to be at these trade shows. Okay, let's be there. Let's be up on the main stage, not just in a booth or walking around hoping we bump into them. Let's make sure that we know who they are so we can make sure that LinkedIn ads are going right in front of them. And those aren't about, hey, buy our thing, do our stuff. It's just, here's who we are. It's pure brand awareness. So once they're interested, then we're able to pull them in with thought leadership content that is through webinars. There's all kinds of new content in the sustainability and climate space in North America. It's a content-rich environment to talk to and to have opinions about for people in that industry, right? So you can really nerd out on this stuff. But for the people who are in it, boy, their world is being shaken up and blown, and new opportunities are springing up and old ones are dying out, and it's going really fast. And that creates a really rich environment to have an opinion, to speak with an authentic voice, and to say, we don't know all the answers, because nobody does. And if anybody else, like our competitor, is telling you that they've got the answers, well, they don't. And here's why. So let's get in this together. And at least then we focus on our approach is, it allows for flexibility here. And here's why we can get started. And here's what we can do starting right now. And here's what we advise and counsel to wait on, and what we advise and counsel to accelerate. And that is resonating with the people and the companies who are interested in what CIBO delivers, which is why we grew 100% year over year last year. So getting that triple digit growth, it's absolutely fantastic. It gets harder and harder to maintain that pace the bigger and more successful you get. But for right now, it's really, really good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are there any strategies out there in sales and marketing right now, or lead gen, that have surprised you lately, either because they used to work and they're tanking, or because you didn't think it would work and it's amazing?
The trade show booths, I think, are going the way of the dodo. There may be industries where that is still the best investment of a couple $100,000. I'm not seeing it, but investing in that and having a booth that you're staffing for people to come around and be like, well, what are you giving away? And I'm going shopping for, water bottles today. Now, where they are working well, are in these like startup focused areas where they're bringing in investors and they're bringing in VCs, and the booths are small little kiosks, and you've got a founder here or there, and it's basically a pitch contest in a big exhibition hall. I think those are a blast, and you're seeing a lot of traffic going there where you've got investors and VCs and PEs and even bigger companies going, okay, what's the newest technology that's happening there? And they're out there learning more than they're looking to necessarily buy technology. But it's also really good exposure for those, for those startups and the startup communities. So I think that's working well for the in-person marketing strategy and tactic. I really like podcasts and webinars. I like them mostly for me because they're very efficient ways of getting out a lot of content, and they act as a really great filter. If you've got a platform where you can see who is engaging with that content, now you've got a really strong intent signal that they're at least open to a conversation. And I think that's really, really important. Whoever thought that email newsletters were going to make a comeback? That's the thing that has surprised me, and I love it.
Nonstop.
Right. It's like, you've got an email newsletter. Well, what are they doing? They're curating good content for me so I don't have to do it, and then they're summarizing it for me. And so by curating and summarizing, if it's a person I trust, if they're coming at it with an authentic voice and some credibility and they're trusted, boy, are they saving me a whole ton bundle of time and awareness, and they may be saving me from making some costly mistakes, at least in the amount of time that I would be otherwise investing. So those are some of the things that are interesting to me. Now, I don't think that every company out there should have their own email newsletter. I mean, that's not the answer.
I was going to tell you something about trade shows. Trade shows oftentimes are you're like standing in this corner waiting for someone hopefully to pass you by and talk with you. And he said he found what he calls the trade show wing woman. In this case, it was a woman, wing person. And her job is to go out there and she starts talking to people and, hey, you're interesting. You're interested in that. Well, these guys over here are doing that. And she brings people to their booth. And they said they skyrocketed their results because they had someone out there whose job was to go find the right people and bring them to the booth. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty genius.
I really like that idea, right? Because the people, when they're at the trade show, right, being there is already a filter for at least domain interest or topical interest. And so having that, having that hunter or that fisher out there who can do that, that's a really good strategy. But yeah, you can't just sit back and be like, oh, I'm going to wait and hope somebody comes by, picks up a pair of socks and that they're the right person for me. That's not working. That passive trade show piece, I don't think that's working anymore.
Yeah. They did say socks were like everybody wanted socks, which I also thought was funny.
Hands down the best gift. I'm looking to see what I have on right now. I know I have a number of pair of trade show socks and I love them. There's some companies that I use for that, but
one of the guys was in an older, less technological industry, and he said they put out those little alcohol bottles of Maker's Mark out on top of their booth, and then like everybody comes and talks to them to get the Maker's Mark bottle.
I did have a success. This was a number of years ago. We did we specifically selected a booth location that was going to be right near the open bar during one of the networking hours. And so we put out baskets of strawberries and 5-hour energy drink for the detox. So you can retox over there and you can detox here. And then we had those 5-hour energy and little bags of Tylenol the next morning, and that was very popular. We got
nice
goodwill from that. This was a conference where people could really tie one on in the evening festivities.
And you were giving way to recover.
Yeah, exactly. So that made some buzz at that trade show, but that was more about kind of making sure that we're picking people that are going to be nearby those open bar stands. So.
I also had somebody on the show recently, and they're like, look, I don't care about how many people I put in my funnel. I wanted initially 2 great partners, right? And those partners are generating referrals for him. And then he's like, and I just want to double that every quarter. So my first quarter I had 2, my second quarter I had 4. I'm working on 8 this quarter.
Okay.
And he was in hyper growth, and I'm like,
nice. Okay.
And he said the number of people that I have sold this quarter, I couldn't even have gotten in their doors in 3 years. Like if I've been doing it on my own.
Because the channeling, right, that can start to scale exponentially.
Yeah, so finding the right channel and the right partner sometimes can be exponential, and just having a team on there that believes in you and is willing to go out and do it. And I've seen that fail so many times too, right? A lot of times the team's like, you're little and I don't care.
Right.
But also if you have the right product mix and they see the fit and everything is right, then that can be epic as well.
You know what I do love is I love finding prospects and finding either the influencer at that prospect or the decision maker and inviting them to be on a podcast with me. We did this at one of our most recent trade shows, the one in San Francisco. We identified a prospect and said, hey, we're not working with you. We would love to someday. And they knew that. But we would love for you to be on our panel as a breakout panelist, right? So we had a breakout panel and a main stage panel. And just inviting them, no strings attached, as an opportunity for them to share their success. I think people really respond well to that. And they're like, yeah, let me talk about my stuff. And as long as you're telling me I don't have to buy anything from you or commit to anything, now you've developed that goodwill and an area where you've exchanged in front of other people insight and topic, and you can see, oh, guess what? We are aligned like this, and maybe we ought to have a subsequent conversation. I think that helps. It's not 100%, nothing's 100%, but it does a lot to do that initial outreach. And I think that's the big takeaway, that marketers and marketing leaders and fractionals such as myself really need to be advising companies to be intentional about marketing. Make that first step, make the offer, make the invitation, and then you're going to get people coming back to you and saying yes and doing it. And at the very worst, you're building goodwill and you're gaining knowledge and you're becoming a thought leadership clearinghouse for the rest of the industry. And at best, you're putting somebody on a new pathway to becoming a client, a paying customer.
And hopefully they're also taking your social clips and they're sending them out to the world, or you put the proper lead magnet on YouTube and they find your content on YouTube and get the lead magnet. Like there's 100 ways to make this work, right?
Exactly. But you have to do that. You can't just hope that it's going to happen. And especially in small startup and scale up companies, there's not that kind of depth of multi-channel understanding of how to operationalize all of the little.
That's why they need you.
Little bits. But that's the name of the game, right? And in very large companies, you've got, one person whose job it is just to do, the YouTube lead magnets for one industry and one for every other industry that they target, and then one for social and one for, you've got all of the cogs in the machine. In smaller organizations, it's one person. Oftentimes it's just a fractional. There's no substitute for the execution, but you have to be smart in the execution. You can't do everything at the very outset. So build it and ramp it and do it in a way that's going to mutually reinforce and amplify everything that comes along.
A couple more questions and I'll let you get out of here. What advice do you have for early stage tech CEOs?
I think the biggest advice is get somebody else out there, get that social proof. Go after social proof. Get that first early customer, second early, third early customer, those early adopters, and extract the social proof from them to say, I believe in this solution, I believe in this product, here's what it did for me. You have to do that in order to be able to spiral up and out, like we've talked about in the rest of your market. When your customers can become your channel, or at least a proof point for the rest of your prospects, that's what sells. And it makes it so much easier and faster to sell and to win those deals, because you don't have to start from zero every single time. But that takes cultivation. You have to cultivate those early social proof points, those early customer referrals. And a lot of them are reticent to do so, especially if they've got big recognizable names. That's a hard nut to crack. And sometimes it means, hey, would you be willing to take a reference call? Only if it's private. And then one of the other things I love for early stage tech CEOs to do is to build a win book. Have somebody like me come in or hire a contractor to build you a win book. And a win book can be, here's who we won, here's why we won, here was the situation, here's who we beat out and replaced, or here's why we lost, right? And so that becomes an essential, and I like printing them and spiral binding them and then literally handing them or sending them via mail to the sales force so that they have a reference here. Now, a lot of these aren't going to be publicly available. It's not something you can put up on your website, right? Most times. But equipping the sales force and your channel with that information is absolutely indispensable when it comes to giving them a leg up when they're on their next sales call or their next in-person meeting. So building those win books, I think, is really, really important. The next is never say no to an opportunity to post and publish on LinkedIn or be on somebody's podcast. That is always an opportunity for you to tell your story on their platform. They're looking for content and you're looking for a way to share who your name is, and they're going to be marketing for you. So we're just going to have talking heads, have a conversation. I want to know, what you're learning, and never say no to that.
So times really feel pretty turbulent. There's news every day about what's changing radically. How do we grow in this? Like, what should we be looking forward to in this next year, and how do we focus our growth to manage all this?
That's a tough question, especially because so many different industries in the world are experiencing things a little bit differently, right? You've got folks who are subject to tariffs and, the consumer price index if they're, dealing in consumer goods. You've got some belt tightening, but then you also have some real excitement around US-based industries. So how do we grow in 2025? I think it is really focusing and laser focusing in on who are you wanting to get in front of and what are you offering that's going to make their life easier, their product more desirable, or their cost of production go down. You have to answer that rather than just being like, hey, I've got a thing. Would you look at my thing? Or would you look at the cool thing that I've built? It's not about that. You go to market with some empathy. And I think that's the big takeaway. Go to market with some empathy. Put yourself in their shoes. They don't care about your company or how smart you are, or where you went to school, or how long it took you to develop this thing, or that you're using all of the buzzwords. What they care is, what is it going to do for me? So answer that so what question, right? And you've got to do that before you go to market. You can't start with a conversation and hope that you just land on it. Do that soul searching first, and then divide that up. That gets down into that hyper personalization, understanding your target addressable market, and who are the specific people, names, first names, last names, titles, how long they've been at that organization, what is motivating them. You might get in front of them if you talk about their, March Madness bracket or something, but that's not going to be the same as delivering the value of what you're delivering to them and their company, how you're making their lives easier, their product more desirable for their market, not yours, or their cost of production and service go down. At that point, then I think you've got something that you can really go to market with. Then it's just a matter of finding out where they're at. Be where they're at. And that's where the marketing channels and the marketing magic comes in. Some of them are going to go to trade shows. Some of them are going to be, they're going to want to see you flash mob them at the ball game. Who knows, right? But that's where the fun part of marketing execution comes in.
I love it. And if I listen a little bit between the lines here, I feel like you wrapped us all the way. You took us all the way back to the beginning where you said, just listen, right? How do I know all those things that you just said? Just shut up and listen for once, So it's perfect.
Love it. Yeah. Shut up and listen. Go to market with some empathy. Shut up and listen.
This has been super fun. Tell us again where our audience can find you.
You can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Billy, BLLY, or at BloomThink.com. That's bloom like a flower, think like what you do in your brain.
Awesome. Billy, thank you so much for being on BeyondSaaS. For leaders in mid-stage tech looking to grow, we drop episodes twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you can find me, Jason Neidl, at tethos.com. That's TETHOS.com. Where you can also grab a free report on how to grow your tech company, just tethos.com/podcast. And of course, drop any questions for me or future guests, comments, and feedback. We appreciate that. Until next time, this is BeyondSaaS.